sin is a perversion of natural things, that it's idolatry, right? It's a subversion of reason that causes us to worship the creation instead of the creator.
Hey everyone, this is Yvette Hampton. Welcome back to the Schoolhouse Rocked Podcast. I am back this week with Missy Andrews. And if you guys heard my last episode with her, it's been several weeks, maybe a couple months since we released that one. You are going to be so encouraged once again. I've told you guys before that one of the ways that we find our guests for the podcast is oftentimes you tell us who you want to hear from, and other times there are people I just know of who are in the homeschool world, and they're speakers and leaders and influencers and people that I just, think, oh, they would be amazing on the podcast. And a friend of mine told me about Missy, and I had heard of Center for Lit, and I had heard of Missy Andrews and Adam Andrews. And I thought, okay, I really want to find out more about this Missy Andrews. And so I started doing some research, and I thought, oh, she has so much good stuff, so many good things to talk about. And what we're going to talk about this week is really her homeschool journey. And as I was looking at her topics and just her passion for moms and for homeschooling and for discipleship, I just thought this is, in addition to the last episode we did, which of course we'll link in the show notes, this was something that I really wanted to have her come back and talk about. And so you are going to just be so blessed this week, as I know I will be too. And so be sure to share this episode with your friends. If you're watching this on YouTube, can you like and subscribe to our channel, and be sure to share that with your friends as well. So we're going to talk with Missy, but before we do, I want to say thank you to our sponsor, CTC Math. If you guys are looking for a great online math program, visit ctcmath.com. Try them out for free, ctcmath.com. Well, Missy, welcome back to the Schoolhouse Rocked Podcast. It is such a delight to have you back. For those who may have missed my last interview with you, would you quickly introduce us to your family and who you are?
Sure. I'm Missy Andrews. I'm married to Adam Andrews, and we started a little family business to help homeschool families teach literature to their kids over 20 years ago now, I guess. Centerforlit.com is where you can find us. We do an online school, but our major focus from the beginning has always been equipping parents to do the work of homeschooling. We think it's a really noble endeavor, and we just want to help. It's a difficult thing to do, this homeschooling thing. And it takes a long time, a lot of concentration and focused effort. And the Lord has provided plenty of people in the community to help us with the work.
Yeah, it is a great community of speakers, leaders, families, everyone who really comes together. And it's so neat to see the Christian homeschooling community come together really as the body of Christ to encourage one another. And one of the ways that we do that is that we can look to those who have gone before us, which you have, and learn from some of your mistakes, learn from your successes. And you wrote a book a couple years ago called My Divine Comedy, A Mother's Homeschooling Journey. And I thought, well, is it a joke book? I mean, how in the world do you get divine and comedy in the same title? I love it so much. And as I started reading the book, I was so moved, because what I realized in this book, and I'm going to let you tell your story of your homeschool journey, but the thing that really captured me was that, Missy, you are an intellect. You are well educated. You are one of those type A people. You are valedictorian. You married the co-valedictorian. You are a scholar. You love books. You love learning. You love all those things. I am in many ways the complete opposite of you. I mean, I love learning and I love books, but I am much more simple-minded. And it's so funny. I told my husband that the other day. I said, I'm so simple compared to people. And I don't mean it in a way that like I'm dumb or stupid. I didn't grow up as an intellect. I didn't grow up digging into, the classics and all of the things that I think as homeschool moms, we think, well, if we're going to be a good homeschool mom, we have to know all of these things and be able to teach them well to our children. And I just didn't grow up that way. And so as I was reading your story, I thought, we are polar opposites. You're a type A. I am a type B. I've said that many times on the podcast, not even a B plus, like just a B. I'm just a type B. Sometimes I can be super organized and have my life all together. And other times I'm just walking around scratching my head going, what in the world am I doing today? And And I've learned to just accept that that is how God created me to
hmm
be.
hmm
But as different as we are, Missy, we have so much in common when it comes to homeschooling, and that we have very much the same fears of messing up our kids.
Yes.
We have the same fears of feeling like we're not enough or we're not doing it good enough. And all the worries that come to us as homeschool moms, I just thought we're really no different. God
hmm
just, in that aspect, God created us differently, but we have very much the same focus in that we want to raise our kids to know Jesus and to love Jesus. And ultimately, that's the goal.
hmm
And so I would love for you to take us through your journey of how you started on this homeschool journey, what that looked like, what your expectations were of yourself. Because as I'm reading your book, I was laughing to myself because I thought, well, she really had it nailed down.
I,
And I am still trying to nail it down 13 years later. Um, but it's a beautiful story that you have of how the Lord has really transformed you and your family and your homeschool through this journey that he's taken you on. So I just want to kind of sit at your feet. I want to learn from you. I want to be encouraged by you, and I want the same for our audience. So I'm going to let you start, just share with us kind of how your homeschool journey began and what the Lord has taken you through for these past, how many years was it how many years ago was it that you
25
started
plus
homeschooling?
years
Okay.
it's been 4 years now, since I
Yeah.
graduated my sixth from our homeschool,
Wow.
and have been in getting used to an empty nest scenario around
Right.
here. But yeah, absolutely. The book itself is a retrospective of my it was 26 years of homeschooling proper, and everything that I learned. People say that if you homeschool, you get a second chance at your own education. And, I heard that along the way, and being a kind of bookish sort, I thought, hey, that sounds great. Get to go back to school and fill in all those gaps from along the way. And it's really true that you get a second chance at your education, but it doesn't mean what you think it means, because education is not what we think it is. Most of us, especially those of us who grew up in a public school environment, really do understand education to be data acquisition, right? Mastery. And very few of us grew up in an environment where we understand education to be a little more philosophical. The opening of a mind to contemplate its self thinking and to come to understand what manner of creature it is and what manner of creature it's not. I like to say that education can't save you, but it can put you in the proper mindset to see that you need saving. And I think we don't know that when we say we're getting a second chance at our own education, that that's what's going to happen to us,
Right.
that we are going to be forced to consider what manner of creature we are all over again. And it is a kind of divine comedy. That title is actually an allusion to Dante's Divine Comedy, which comes to us in three parts, or three books. He says we get the Inferno, Purgatorio, and Paradiso. And it's the story of a soul's journey to God, essentially. And in the story, Dante makes himself the protagonist. And he says that he finds himself lost in a dark wood because the straight path has been lost. He's been trying to climb up the mountain to God, and his path has been obstructed again and again by these three beasts that represent his sins, and he just can't seem to get around them. I don't know if any of you can relate to this, but I certainly could. It is the struggle of the Christian to overcome the sins that plague him in his attempts to find the Lord and to behold his beauty and inquire in his temple, as the psalmist would say, right? The good things and the ultimate things is what the Inferno is about. And all of the lessons that he's learned in the Inferno about what sin is and what life is good for, and the role of reason in guiding us to an understanding of those things and to a reliance on the grace of God instead of our own feeble attempts to perfect ourselves. Dante is confronted not just with the ideas of sin and death and idolatry, but with the fact of it in his own life. And this is what my title alludes to, is this kind of journey of the soul and the impediments to to any kind of real progress that we experience in our real-time lives that plague us. That is our own sin, not just man's sin nature. Yes, we all ascribe to this, but our own sin. And the truth of the matter is, we learn in the scriptures that the heart is deceitful and desperately wicked. We don't even know the depths of our own sin. And oftentimes, in the very act of doing something that we think is so, so good, we find that we're in the midst of deep, deep sin. And that was what happened to me in my homeschooling project.
We want to thank all of our sponsors for making this show possible: BJU Press Homeschool, CTC Math, Apologia, and IEW. Without them, we wouldn't be able to do this. Visit the show notes for links to these great companies and thank them for supporting the Schoolhouse Rocked podcast. We are back with Missy Andrews. Okay, continue on with your story because I'm captivated now.
Oh, good. Well, I was just going to say, so I was born to a couple of academics, two teachers and lifelong learners. And so I grew up in a house filled with books where education was really important. And so I really valued education. Adam, my husband, also really valued education. We're both book nerds. We graduated from Hillsdale College, which is a great book school with a really fine liberal arts education. And 4 days after graduation, we got married. And it wasn't too long after that, as Adam always likes to say, the stork began to pay regular visits to our house, dropping off little bundles. And before we knew it, we had 6 children of our own. And my parents had been involved in public education. I was educated in the public school. And initially, before Adam and I got married, when we were talking about how we would educate our future children, that at that point were only ideas and hopes in our hearts, we argued about how we were going to do this. And I think I said something like, public school is fine for me. It'll be fine for my children. And what could you possibly be saying about my family? What's the matter with my family? And that kind of nonsense. And I don't remember that argument really ending, but I can tell you that when my oldest son, Ian, was about 2 years old, I came to bed one night with a magazine that laid out all of the different approaches to homeschooling. And Adam looked at me and said, "What are you reading?" And I told him, and he said, "Well, I thought public school was fine for your children." And I said, "Oh, no, my children are going to be homeschooled." So the Lord had clearly taken care of that by turning my heart towards homeschooling. And the type of homeschooling that appealed to me most as I surveyed all the different options was classical homeschooling, because it just, it smacked of the liberal arts, liberal meaning the arts that we study that make us free, right? And the idea of the freedom, not just political freedom, but spiritual freedom, was really important to me, that my kids would grow up knowing the Lord and walking in the liberty of the Lord, understanding what that meant. Mm-hmm. So this means was very familiar to me because of my education at Hillsdale, and also very attractive to me because of my my Christianity. So we decided that's what we would do. I started homeschooling Ian when he was about 4 years old. It was way too early. And I was, as you said, very type A personality. It was really important to me to do it right. I had to do it right. And I was willing to do whatever it took to do it right. I was terrified I was going to do it wrong and mess my kids up. So I spent hours and hours preparing. Initially, when I started, I was using a phonics curriculum that scripted the lessons. And I remember I'd have it open on my lap and I would read word for word everything that this woman, bless her heart, had written down for me to say. And it was a long time before I went off notes, off book, the theater people would say, and had any confidence that, oh yeah, this isn't rocket science. I can do this, because I just really wanted to do it right. It was so important. And that is the way I approached the education project with my kids from beginning to end, with ardor and earnestness. And I really was willing to sacrifice whatever. I would do whatever it took to give my kids the education that I wanted them to have. And homeschooling draws that kind of personality. whether you're type A or type B, the earnestness of the parents involved in the homeschooling process, you can't overstate it. We're doing this on purpose and it costs us something.
Right.
It's a really noble enterprise. The problem is that I guess I conflated the nobleness of the enterprise with nobleness in myself. And that was the beginning of the problem. That I was the fly in the homeschooling ointment. That is the hardest, deceitful, and desperately wicked. Who can know it, right? We don't know the depravity in our own hearts. And so I latched on to this homeschooling idea and imagined that in some way, the virtuousness of the project made me virtuous, that the goodness of the project made me good, and lost sight of the fact that I was a sinner going about this business. On any given day, I was about the business of discipline and instruction and preparation and grading and all of those kinds of things that everybody is engaged in. And it looked pretty ordinary around here. But what I was doing constantly and earnestly was trying like mad to be good enough. Everything depended on it as far as I was concerned, that I was a good enough teacher, that I had prepared well enough, that they were prepared well enough. So pretty soon, because of the nature of the beast that is homeschooling, when my child got an A on their report card, I got an A on my report card. When my child failed the test, I failed the test. Because you're so involved in the process, you begin to conflate issues, if you're anything like me. And it's so subtle that it's almost unacknowledged, right? You don't. Nobody's messing up their kids on purpose. All of us want our kids to be well and to succeed. It's just that there's this impulse in our hearts to save ourselves. Right? And we grasp at the things around us in order to try to do that, to secure identity and name and security. And we look at this homeschooling project, which when I began the homeschooling project with my kids, homeschooling was like swimming upstream in the culture.
Sure.
There's still a little of that, but it's become much more mainstream than it was
sure.
25 years ago, right? And so there was this deep need to validate the project through success. And success meant results. Success meant A's and high scores on achievement tests and scholarships to colleges and high-paying jobs. And you can fill in the blanks. You know, it looks the same, I think, across the board. And all of those things are great things, but they're not ultimate things.
Right.
When we look to those things to validate our work, we do violence to the work itself, right? Though they might give us some good information, they don't actually have the ability to name us or to judge us in those things. But I was pretty quick to allow them to. So the role of the homeschool mom in education is to facilitate the learning process in their kids. And as I mentioned before, education is not what we think. It's not just let's learn about states and capitals and see if we can't get 100% on the test. Those are the things of education that we work on. But the real educational moment comes when Johnny gets an F on one of his papers and comes face to face with either his laziness or maybe it's a real impasse. He's just not wired up to learn that thing that way. And maybe like for me in mathematics, math was never going to be my thing. And I was pressed all the way to the end to work as hard as anybody could just to make the grade to move on to the next level and progress. I was never, ever going to solve the problems of the world mathematically. And I remember working in the subject of mathematics brought me up against myself so that I realized that though I was created in the image of God and I could learn to reason, I wasn't God. I was just a creature. And there were some things that were never going to be my thing. And that those things were gifts to me so that I would never make too much of myself, so that I would never come to think that I was a God instead of beloved of God. They were like road signs to help me figure out what a creature is. and to redirect my impulses in a large way. So sometimes the F's that we get teach us more than the A's that we get, if that makes any sense. But if you're conflating the success of the enterprise with worldly success, grades and data and entrance exams that get you in the door and give you hefty scholarships, you lose sight of the real purpose of education in that regard, and you begin to conflate ends and means. And suddenly, the identity project is written all over the surface of the homeschooling project, both for the child and for the mother, because the child learns from the mother. That the apple doesn't fall far from the tree.
We are out of time. We're going to come back on Wednesday. We're going to continue this conversation. I love hearing your story. I love hearing your heart and how the Lord has changed you in a good way through what he's brought you through. So thank you guys for joining us. If you have not left a review for this podcast, would you do that on whatever app you're listening to, or if you're listening to this podcast on YouTube, maybe you're watching it, leave a review, leave a comment, and let people know why they should listen as well. We love you guys so much. Have a great rest of your day, and we'll see you back here on Wednesday. Bye.
Education is discipleship, and this is something I didn't understand until I was probably 3 years into homeschooling. The Bible teaches us in Luke 6:40 that when a student is fully trained, he will be like his teacher. And as we look around the culture right now, I think it begs the question, who is teaching our children? Who is teaching our children, and what are they teaching our children? And to me, the primary benefit of having my children home with me is I am able to impart my worldview to my children.